Well, we'll bring the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'd like to start with a pledge to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Next
We
slide,
have-
please.
The roll call, please.
Okay. Joe Mann,
Here.
Jim Baumker,
Here.
Dale Robbins, DG Garcia,
Here.
Charlie Jenks, Tom Sahlberg,
Here.
Gene Hutchell,
Here.
Troy Mullenix.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, Charlie Jenks did request that he be excused.
Charlie Jinks had a medical procedure done today and requests to be excused. I hear a motion for that, please.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So he's excused. We haven't heard from Mr. Commissioner Robbins.
As I understand it, he's recently had some very important health issues as well. And he was unable to attend one of our meetings, so I would presume it's continuing. And on his behalf, in light of what I know, I would ask that he be excused from today's meeting. In the event he comes in, that's a different story, but I do know that recently, a couple of days he's been ill.
So would you make that motion?
Yes, I move that we allow ourselves to excuse, with permission, Dale Robbins from this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. Introductions, one of the things we tend to do with new people is put you on the spot. And I'd like to have you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you and why you would like to be part of this commission.
I'll start. My name's Troy Mullenix, local business owner, local resident here, and former city employee. I have a background in planning at Eastern Washington University. Worked for the city for about 3 years in the planning department as well as the recreation coordinator. And being that I moved back to the area about 1.5 years ago, looking to be as involved as I can. Being a block outside of city limits, I'm not allowed to run for city council. So this is kind of the next best thing, and I'm excited to be on board. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming back and joining us again.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Gene?
My name is Gene Hutchell. Some folks call me Herschel. It's a nickname. A lot easier to remember sometimes or to say. My wife and I have lived here in Liberty Lake for about 7 years. We have 4 sons. They lived all over the country. Retired military. Been active in the communities, the 2 communities we lived in since we moved to Washington in 1992. Been the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Yale. Been active in Rotary. Been active in city activities in Renton. My wife was the superintendent of schools there. She was the governor's chief of staff when he first came into office. We've actually been involved in politics one way, shape, or another since I retired out of the military. The reason I liked joining this organization was based on my experience with the City Academy. I think that was the name. No, City Academy. Very insightful. This is a pleasant place to live. I was always fascinated with Liberty Lake and how the people seem to be very likable. It's easy to be here. And so I thought I'd spend some time here in the City Planning Commission, see how I could help.
Good. Thank you. Glad you're joining us. Sure. Thank you. Also, we should continue by way of introduction so you guys get to know the rest of us. We'll start with Commissioner Sahlberg, who has been here longer than anybody.
Tom Sahlberg. I've been in Liberty Lake now for 12 years and have been on all of the commissions. I was appointed to the new Community Engagement Commission but was then appointed to the city council, so I still haven't sat in that chair yet. I've been in my prior life has been all about community safety. 26 years with Spokane Police Department. Did the victim witness program for the county prosecutor's office, and then was pulled out of there by the governors, Gregoire and Inslee, to be on the Indeterminate Sentence Review Board, which is parole board, for 10 years. And so my lens is community safety. I always think that when we have our discussions about the direction that we're going, the first thing that we're looking at is the foundation of community or public safety first. And so that I'm looking forward to the last 2 years we're on the city council, and I've learned some things there that I think hopefully I can bring here to understand the first time that I sat around. Lisa was brand new when I was brand new, and I learned a lot here, and I hope it continue.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Bonk.
Yeah, my name is Jim Baumker, and we've been residents of Liberty Lake since 2004. So I have a finance background. I've been chief financial officer for a variety of public and private companies. And I retired in 2011 after the birth of my first grandson. And I've been on the commission now, I think it's a year and a half, maybe, I can't recall.
Yeah.
About a year and a
Years,
half,
almost
couple of
2 years.
years,
Almost
couple of
2 years,
years, yeah. And I've also been on the salary commission, and just happy to do whatever I can to help out. But, okay, so I have a finance background, and I approach a lot of things, not only public safety, but also kind of looking at the dollars and cents. So
We're glad you're here.
thank you.
My name is Joe Mann, retired realtor after 23 years in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene area, and retired in 2015. Planned to move to Florida. We got down there and didn't like it. Came back and looked at each other and said, we haven't found any place we like better than here. We built a home in the River District in 2018 and moved there. And I'm an eternal volunteer. I love being on the planning commission. This is I joined it in 2019. So I believe that this commission is the tip of the spear in the direction that this city is growing and how it's growing and the businesses that we attract. And I think that's a really important role. I also serve on the Civil Service Commission for the Police Department and the Civil Service Commission for the Spokane Valley Fire Department. So as a realtor, I made my living from the community, so I feel the need to give back. So that's what I'm doing in my retirement, is giving back and enjoying it greatly. So I'm proud to be here. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you. I'm DG Garcia, transplant from California. Happy to be here in the state of Washington. I arrived 2015 on vacation and did not leave after that point. I've been here 9 years. I have a family growing up on the other side of the lake. Lucky them, but I get to visit. My background is multicultural psychology and cultural anthropology. I'm a people person, and what I do mainly focuses on the human condition and how we interact with each other. I've been on the Planning Commission for a short while, almost 2 years or the same. And I'm enjoying making some good advice decisions that move forward to the city seat of council and mayor to make determinations on where we go as a building enterprise. I speak several languages. I'm a Braille transcriber and a sign linguist. I'm nosy overall. And I am just excited to be here, to be with all of you colleagues and friends. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of the commission.
Thank you. Okay, with that, everybody knows staff as well, correct? Lisa and everybody else here that's in charge. We just do what they tell us to do. So, all right, we'll move on to general business.
Michael, can you go to the next slide, please?
Okay, we'll move on to general business. review the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Anyone knows? If not, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Or should we approve it as is?
Second,
Second.
thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Also, we have the minutes from our December 11th meeting. Are there any changes or additions to those minutes? Is there a motion to approve? Sir.
Commissioner Mann, can I please get clarification on if I am allowed to motion, being that there are two members absent at this meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, you can motion, you can vote, you are a voting member. Again, just for clarification, so Jean is the first adjunct and you're the second adjunct. So if one member is absent, you become a voting member. If two members are absent, you also become.
Oh, sorry. So. good.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Good question.
Yeah. So, approval of the minutes, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have to elect our chair and vice chair for the coming year. The way we've always done it, and I think it works the best, is to open the floor to nominations. And then any nomination needs to be seconded, and then we'll accept all nominations and then take a vote.
Yeah, I nominate Joe for chair.
Second.
Second.
Oh. All right, thank you. Are there other nominations for chair? All those in favor of Joe being chair, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Don't say no. Okay, thank you. Hopefully won't let you guys down. I don't plan to. So vice chair will fill in case the chair is not available, which also includes making presentations from time to time to the city council about things that we are working on at any particular time. That's actually open to any one of you commissioners who would like to do it at any time to get some face time with the city council. You're more than welcome to do that. So
I would like to
I'll
make a
open the
motion.
floor to the nomination.
I'd like to nominate Tom Solberg for a number of reasons. He has the experience, the wherewithal, and the commitment to the community and how it builds out, irrespective to what we see now in 2024, but what we see in the future. Because of all of that, I've paid attention when he was on the planning commission. I liked how he operated, how he deliberated. Those are important things to me. So I would like to nominate Tom Solberg for the position as vice chair.
Well, I'll second that one.
So moved and second, are there other nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Solberg. All right, the next item is our design review committee membership. Commissioner Garcia and I are only two members at the present time. We could really use a third or even a fourth.
Or even if we're-
Um,
we have had people in the role as kind of similarly an adjunct, and it works well. Just in terms of scheduling those meetings, things have been relatively busy. We had a little bit of a slack just over the holidays, but we're jamming up on pre-development meetings, which means we'll soon have some pre-application meetings coming. Or
Yeah, and this committee, this is a subcommittee to the planning commission. It only meets as needed. When we get plans in, our job as a design review is to look at the design and say, yes, it'll fit into the way the city looks, the ambiance, the image that we're trying to project as a city, or no, it doesn't, or it would fit if you make these changes. So it is not a huge time commitment. And many times we do it by Zoom when we don't have another way to do it. Most of our meetings take 15, maybe 20 minutes. So if you would like to volunteer, we'd love to have a couple more people join us.
I'll be happy to volunteer.
I would as well.
All right, good. you two guys are hereby shanghaied. So thank you.
So I heard three, so Tom, Jean and Troy are all interested. And that's wonderful.
Tom, Gina, and Troy,
Is that correct? Did I hear correctly?
all
Okay,
three of them.
perfect.
Okay. Yeah, and all three of you can attend. The voting is, everybody can vote, right?
Everybody can vote. yes.
Yeah, any of you
I
that
just
volunteer.
I need to have two planning commissioners to balance out my two staff people.
So we will make sure that you get notified of those meetings.
Lisa, are the
Um,
meetings still the same as they were before? You sit
So-
down and get to look at preliminary
did-
plans and then you.
Yeah, yeah,
give us a
so
presentation.
yeah, so what happens is, and just for a little bit more explanation, we do have very specific architectural design standards. That's this piece that the architectural, or that the design review committee is looking at. And building orientation, those are the two things. And we do have standards in code, and you're looking to see if it's meeting the standards or not. You will get the drawings in advance, and you will also get a narrative that kind of lays out how it supposedly meets the standards. And so you will have some materials in advance. Generally speaking, I'll reach out when we have an application come in, and we try and schedule them within the next week or so, depending upon what the schedule looks like. And I'll just ask for some available times and get the time that works for the most people.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for volunteering to do that.
Yes, thank you.
The next is our 2024 meeting calendar. It's on the back of the last page. And there's April 10th is highlighted.
Yes, April 10th is highlighted specifically because I'm on babysitting duty in Tennessee. I'm gonna be I'm the first 2 weeks in April, I'm out there with my grandkids. And while my daughter goes to Italy to celebrate her 40th birthday.
You want the itinerary from the kids and their honeymoon?
I'm sorry?
Mike, I'll send you their itinerary.
Okay. Anyhow, so it'll be, so I will not be here. So you have three options. The first of which is that you reschedule the meeting. The second of which is, you let Amy run the show. And the third of which is you skip the meeting. And I'm gonna leave that up to you, planning commissioners. What is your desire, in that, on that round?
I've heard Amy's presentations at the council. I think she can fill in just fine. We could continue with her meeting.
Got it.
That's my preference.
Other thoughts? Okay. So we will scratch that one.
Well, so then the thought is that you would just adopt the meeting schedule as is, unless you have any agita about any other date.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adopt the schedule as is?
I motion that we adopt the schedule as is.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next is our workshop, and I'll turn it over to Madam Key.
Thank you. Michael, can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. And so we're trying to give you a bit of an overview about what to expect for the upcoming 2026 through 2020 or 2046 periodic comprehensive plan update, which is due. It must be adopted by June 30th of 2026. And you may think that we're starting to talk about it early. We are not. And I think by the end of this presentation, you'll understand why not. Next slide, please. So first, a little bit about Washington's Growth Management Act. So the Growth Management Act was adopted before the city ever incorporated, back in 1990. And it's a planning act. Almost every state in the nation has an overarching regulation around comprehensive planning and land use planning, and that's what the Growth Management Act is for the state of Washington. It's intended to provide tools to basically manage growth in a way that we are directing population to urban centers, thus reducing sprawl and the cost of infrastructure extensions, et cetera. Really looking to comprehensively plan for housing, transportation, utilities, and capital facilities in support of anticipated population growth. It's also intended to protect rural resources, farmlands, and shorelines. The comprehensive plan that the community adopts is intended to be its vision for itself, and it really serves as a foundation for the city's development code. Next slide, please. So I snagged this from Commerce Department. This is the state of Washington, and basically all the areas that are planning under the Growth Management Act are divided into 4 segments. We in Spokane County are in the gray section. That means that we're in the 2026 cycle for a periodic update. We have right now, 2024 is the first round, the most urban counties in the state, followed by most of the west side. The states that are starred, or I'm sorry, the counties that are starred are those that are only partially planning under Growth Management Act. So they don't have all of the same requirements that we do. But counties and cities are required to review amendments to the Growth Management Act. We've had a lot of changes in the last 2 years that are really going to significantly affect what we're doing in this periodic comprehensive plan update. And I'm going to be talking about those a little bit more. So it is a basis for doing the comprehensive plan. And Kathy, can you note that Dale came to the meeting at 4:22?
My apologies, everybody was in court.
No worries.
So the comprehensive plan, as I've explained, is a foundational document. And out of that, once we've adopted updates to our periodic comprehensive plan update, the next task will be to update our development code. And typically that happens within 1 year to 2 years of the adoption of the comp plan. We start it as soon as we complete it. For some of the regulations that are going to be required to be changed, they're required to be adopted 6 months after the adoption of this comprehensive plan. So it's going to be super important as we go through our comprehensive plan that we really identify within our policies those things that will need to be changed in our development code. Even though we won't necessarily have the language associated therewith, we can certainly create a roadmap for ourselves as we go forward. Also, as part of the periodic comprehensive plan update, we revisit areas of the urban growth areas. These are the areas that are not included in incorporated cities, but are planned for urban densities and urban services, and may be annexed into a city, an adjacent city. State law says we cannot annex a city that, or an area that is not within the urban growth area. So, so there's that, and we'll talk a little bit more about what it looks like in our neck of the woods. We also have to do population projections for the 20-year planning period. And that's really foundational to just about all of the planning that we're going to be doing. And so, that's a critical piece. It's critical to housing. It's critical to transportation, utilities, infrastructure. It changes everything. We also are required to adopt a critical area ordinance that follow. The critical area ordinances or shoreline master plans. We technically don't have any shorelines within the city of Liberty Lake, so we aren't really required to do shoreline planning. Although that's kind of a sticky wicket, and we'll get to that, as time permits. Wetlands, et cetera. And we do have those ordinances in our development regulations now. We will have to look at them and look at any changes to them once we get through the comprehensive plan. So as part of our development code amendments. And then it also looks at resource lands, and that's really not applicable to us. It also does require looking at rural lands, but that component only relates to county requirements. So next slide, please. I'm trying to move my own slide. So under the Growth Management Act, there's a number of mandatory elements: land use, housing, capital facilities plan. Although the capital facilities plan only has to be a 6-year plan. As you know, we do a 6-year plan every year. I'm going to pause for a second here, and that we don't have a 20-year capital facilities plan, but we really should at least have a build-out capital facilities plan. And that is one of the things that I think that we're going to want to do with this periodic comprehensive plan update, particularly because we are rapidly approaching our build out and want to make sure that we plan for the necessary infrastructure to get us there. Utilities, even though we're not a utility purveyor, we do have to look at that. And obviously the availability of utilities affects the ability to provide housing and land use and on, so on and so forth. Transportation is also a big piece of it. Economic development, parks and recreation. I have this asterisk because Washington state law says that they can't require us to do any of these elements unless they fund it. This particular section is not funded, and therefore it's technically not required, but certainly encouraged. Our last periodic comprehensive plan, the city had just completed a parks, trails, and recreation plan. And so we will be looking at that, and we'll have a chapter related to it. We're not necessarily going to have the full-blown plan that was done a few years ago, but we will certainly need to look at what changes in terms of our population projections and our land uses, and what that means in terms of recreational resources, open space, et cetera. And certainly as we get into some of the other elements, our multimodal, the values we place on multimodal will actually really help us with the next piece, which is also required, and that's climate change and resiliency. That's the newest addition to the mandatory elements of the comprehensive plan. The state has funded this one, and we do have a grant application, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So these are the chapters that we have in our current comprehensive plan. 14 chapters. Chapter 14, the capital facilities plan, just incorporates our annual, the 6-year capital facilities plan that we do every year by reference into the comprehensive plan. But this is what we have. Interestingly enough, we have an entire chapter that is just goals and policies. In most other communities, the goals and policies are organized by element. And so there's pros and cons to that, and we can talk about that. One of the things that I don't see, and it's not required currently, is an implementation chapter. And I'm going to talk about why I think that's going to make a lot of sense for us this time around. Next slide, please. And so again, I just wanted to, most people who don't sit on a planning commission think that this map is the comprehensive plan land use map, and it's certainly an important product of it, but it's not it's not even the most important part of it. Why I wanted to show you this is because specifically it shows the urban growth areas, and they are the areas that are outlined in red. Now, the one that is in the the southwest corner of this map. Is it, actually abuts Spokane Valley, and Spokane Valley has annexed some of that already. One of the things you should know about urban growth areas is they're not owned by any city. They're just an area that's planned for urban growth, that services are available, and either city can, in this particular case, the area that is in the southwest corner is mostly developed and probably more of the character of Spokane Valley than it is of the character of the city of Liberty Lake. Plus, if we annex them in, we'd have to annex in Sprague Avenue. And right now, that section of Sprague Avenue is all in the county. The other piece, that little triangular piece, interestingly enough, is also developed. So these don't really serve much purpose in terms of being in the urban growth boundary. Opportunities, obviously to the east, we butt up against Spokane Valley. To the north, our boundary does not actually extend all the way to the river. It extends to the state lands that encompass the Centennial Trail. There's a lot of reasons why it might not make sense. I do believe that that area north of the river, if there is an expansion of the urban growth area, that's the one that's likely to happen, because part of it is in the county's tip and lift reimbursement area. It's owned by Centennial, and there is definitely there's definitely some politics for why that would make sense. Whether or not that would be something that would be annexed eventually by the city of Spokane Valley or the city of Liberty Lake is something that's up for conversation. But as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any shorelines right now, which means we don't have any shoreline management. That's a big piece. It's a big, there's a lot of bureaucratic requirements associated with that we don't have to deal with right now. What the other interesting thing, although this may change too, is that we don't really have any floodplains in our city except a little piece that's planned for open space in the River District, a little teeny tiny, less than an acre. There's a little piece near Homestead Drive that is HOA owned, and a pretty significant portion of Trailhead Golf Course. And so there are no areas that could be built upon within the floodplain. We do have a flood damage prevention ordinance so that we can access FEMA funds, but we don't really have to deal with floodplain management. Again, there's all sorts of certifications and different things that go into that. Extending above the river, north of the river, would pull us into all of those additional requirements. I think one of the things too that is important to remember with that is that the city worked really, really hard to bridge I-90 to really create more connectivity between the north part of our city and the south part of our city. If we were to annex north of the river, we would be back into a single point of access within the city, which would make delivery of services more challenging. It's not that it couldn't be done, but it would create, again, more of a separation. So those are just some of the considerations. At the end of the day, it's not in the urban growth area right now. We don't have to have that conversation until it's timely to have that conversation, until the developer looks to potentially develop those areas. The property owner would have two options if that was in the urban growth area. One of the things we should be thinking about as a city, as part of our comprehensive plan, though, is what is our vision for ourselves? Is it our vision to expand into that area, or do we see that maybe fitting more into Spokane Valley? So those are conversations to be had, and there's no right or wrong answers. It is what the community wants for itself. But I did want to just spend a moment on urban growth areas because that will be a big part of the conversation. Oh, by the way, we have no control over what happens with the urban growth areas. That's a county decision now, and we are at the table in joint planning, and I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit. But at the end of the day, that will be the Board of County Commissioners who makes the decision about what is or is not in the urban growth area. Next slide, please. So here are some of the elements of the periodic comprehensive plan update process, and they're not necessarily not in any particular order. I mean, we are working to develop a work program right now, and I will be bringing that back to you possibly as early as next meeting. A working draft of it. We need to develop a community engagement plan. We need to initiate county-city collaboration and public engagement. So we already have started that process, and there is a planning technical advisory committee that Amy and I both sit on that is made up of the planning professionals throughout Spokane County. We meet to walk through the process of county planning policies, population projections, land quantity analysis. And we'll get into all of those things a little bit at a county level. And what happens at the county level will to some degree drive what happens at our city level. And so it's very important that we're at the table. We're advising the steering committee of elected officials, also known as SCIO, and the mayor sits on that. They make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, but at the end of the day, the Board of County Commissioners makes the decision. I will say that the last periodic comp plan update, it got pretty political at the end of the day. And actually the decisions related to the urban growth area were appealed to the Growth Management Board. And we ended up with a settlement agreement that bound our hands up until this periodic comprehensive plan update. So my understanding is we have new legal counsel at Spokane County that is very interested in avoiding a repeat of that. So hopefully we have learned our lesson, and we will follow the guidance of the state as it relates to moving forward with these kind of issues. And forgive my tangent. So getting back to some of the other things that we need to do, review of existing plans and regulations, data gathering and analysis. We do need to start a SEPA review. It's a little early for that because we don't even know what population we're planning for yet. Staff reports and maps and draft plan and development regulations, issue public notices and hold public hearings, make SEPA determinations, submit a notice to Commerce for a 60-day review, adopt the plan and regulations, and submit notice of adoption to Commerce and publish updates by June 30th of 2026. So there's a lot involved, and there will be some consultants involved as well. Next slide, please.
Lisa, what does the acronym SEPA mean?
State Environmental Protection Act, which is different states have, all of them have it. It's Seeker in New York State. It is CEQA in California. So yeah.
Thank you.
So I want to touch a little bit on new Growth Management Act legislation that's happened in the last 2 years, because this is going to be a big driver of our process this year. And for those of you who were around when, I don't think anybody was on the Planning Commission when the last comp plan was updated, but you probably were around as it was being developed. Some big changes, and I'm going to go through just on a really high level. Some of these require changes or analysis as it relates to this periodic comprehensive plan update. Some of them are a little more global. Some of them will require specific development regulation changes once we complete the comp plan, the periodic comp plan update. So in 2022, the big one was HB 1220. And for those of you who were around, we actually went through code amendments in 2021 to deal with transitional and supportive housing and emergency shelters. And because that legislation was passed and we had until August of that year to adopt new regulations. We got her done. We did get her done. There have been even some changes since then, but we have that piece of it done. We also talked about some of the other pieces related to the requirement for housing for all economic and housing type categories. And that was embedded as well, and something that would need to be addressed as part of the periodic comprehensive plan update. Good news is that we're the third round of comp plan updates, so there's other guinea pigs before us who have to figure out some of this. But that's a big part of what's going to happen in the housing and population allocation pieces. And so we'll talk about that. So it requires cities to plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population of the state and capacity for housing needs and building types. And so and they're very explicit about the definitions that we're planning for. So we're looking at everything from extremely low income, 0 to 30% of the area median income. And it's, by the way, the standard for defining our own median income here in the city is going to be probably too challenging, and we're probably going to be stuck with the county median income. Very low income, 30 to 50% of AMI. Low income is 50 to 80% of AMI. Permanent supportive housing, emergency housing and shelters. And then in the most recent round, they've also added that middle housing piece. So we have to show the potential for duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes. Now, those of you who've heard me talk about middle housing before know that we already have that baked into our development code, but we've got a pretty progressive development code, but even we will have to make some changes to our housing regulations as it relates to this middle housing piece. Next slide, please. So changes to development regulations that involve the post-comprehensive plan. So HB 2001 allows for teeny homes as an incentive program to provide more affordable housing options. No real action needed there unless we desire to do so, unless we feel that it's a policy that's potentially available to us as we try and meet the requirements for providing opportunities for housing for the full range of housing needs. But SB 5235 and HB 1337, I feel like I jumped way ahead on as I was going through. I did, didn't I? Can we go back a couple slides? I don't think I got through the changes. Yeah. Okay, so let me do that first. So I was just talking about 1220. So we also have HB 1241 that happened in 2022 that changes the periodic update cycle from 8 to 10 years with a 5-year implementation progress report required. Now, we don't have an implementation chapter, but in working in other states where implementation was required, it's a really great tool. And given that we're going to have to do this progress and implementation progress report at year 5, we would be doing ourselves a favor to set the table by defining what that implementation strategy is, the implementation plan is, and then it will be a much easier analysis to do. So that's just a thought, not required, but it certainly would be beneficial. SB 5235 increases housing inventory by removing arbitrary limits on housing, i.e. owner occupancy for ADUs. there is an exception that, you can, require a limited time frame for owner occupancy as it relates to ordinances trying to limit short-term rentals, i.e. Airbnb, but since our code doesn't allow it right now, we don't have a need for that, so that is an item, and then coupled with some legislation in 2023 HB 1337, we actually will have some changes to our ADU standards.
What's an ADU?
Accessory dwelling unit. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Also in 2022, SB 5818, which promotes housing constructions in cities through amendments to and limiting both judicial, administrative and judicial appeals under SEPA, the Environmental Law, and Growth Management Act appeals to the Growth Management Board. So that actually is reinforced by SB 5412 that happened the next year with SEPA categorical exemptions for housing. So in 2023, we have some changes to middle housing requirements, to accessory dwelling units, project and design review standards. It just says that they can't be arbitrary and generic, that they have to be very specific standards. We have specific standards now. My sense is that this is directly targeted at Seattle. And if anybody knows, it takes about 14 to 18 months to get through their design review process. So that's got to have a chilling effect on development. There's also a HB 1042, which provides for building conversions, so taking basically office buildings and other types of existing buildings and converting them to housing, and creates and kind of limits what the city can regulate or what they can deny for that. It's intended to encourage the conversion of commercial and other types of existing building spaces that are underutilized for housing purposes. HB 1181 and HB 1170 are the two companion bills that result in the need for us to do the climate resiliency and mitigation chapter. And then there is also the ability for cities to adopt a categorical exemption for housing. And there are some things that we can't do with that. And those are that will result in some need for some kind of updates to our environmental regulations. Next slide, please. So I talked about the big lifts with HB 1220. I'm going to keep going. Next slide, please. Those are what relates to the comp plan. These are things that are going to have to be addressed as part of the development regulations following the adoption of the comp plan. But as I indicated, some of these have to be in place 6 months after we adopt it. So, and these are the ones that kind of, that have an impact. HB 2001 allows for teeny homes as an incentive program. Doesn't require us to do it, but it may be an option if we are challenged with meeting some of the requirements. HB 5235 and HB 1337 require some changes to ADUs. So yes, it eliminates owner occupancy requirements, which are unenforceable anyhow. We have to allow at least 2 accessory dwelling units per lot in any residential zone, including the single family zone. So the city may not establish a maximum gross floor area associated with ADUs. That's how we kept them accessory. It also states the city may not require additional design standards that are not applicable to the primary dwelling unit. And we do have some of those. So we have things like the pitch of the roof and whatnot that doesn't apply to the house, but it applies to the ADU. So it also limits regulations regarding additional off-street parking requirements, and it depends upon the zone and the number of, it's a little bit more, I'm not gonna go into the details on that, just trust me to say, we will have to change our parking requirements as it relates to ADUs. SB 5818 details potential development regulations to increase residential building capacity that are exempt from administrative or judicial appeals under SEPA and GMA. And one of the things that's interesting, though, is that we still have some requirements related to transportation concurrency, even though it's categorically exempt from SEPA. And I'm not sure that it necessarily expedites anything. I think what it really does, it really just avoids the potential for appeals, as we've been through a couple times with the Valley. Next slide, please. We'll back up a little bit, I think. So also HB 1110, with regard to middle housing, requires an urban city of our size to allow at least 2 dwelling units per lot in a single family zone unless zoning already provides for higher density. So we already do allow for 0 lot line duplexes, but we'll also have to allow for just outright duplexes in the single family zone. HB 1042 prohibits the following regarding conversions of existing buildings to housing. So, somebody who proposes converting an office or a call center to apartments, we are required to allow density of up to 50% greater than what the underlying zone would allow for multifamily. Now, the interesting thing is, in our mixed use zones, we don't have a maximum density for residential, so it doesn't really have much of an effect on us, but I think it may have a pretty significant effect in other communities. It does impose we can't impose additional parking requirements, exterior design standards, or setback requirements on a building being converted into multifamily use or adding additional units. We can't deny a building permit for nonconformity for parking, height, setbacks, elevator size if we're dealing with a conversion of an existing building. But there is one exception, and the one exception is unless the building official identifies a life safety issue. So we still have the life safety protections. And then it does require a transportation concurrency study for such conversion, so that WashDOT and Spokane Valley still have an opportunity to get their fingers in the pie. Next slide, please. So when in dealing with these new housing requirements, it all starts with population projections, right? And so we have to determine what our 20-year population projection is. And population projections are done on a county-wide basis, and then they're allocated to the individual jurisdictions. So the steering committee of elected officials and planning technical advisory committee really advise on this, and we're already in the midst of crunching numbers. So Spokane County's 2026 to 2046 population projections is currently under review. In fact, I left on your desk a memo that from the Planning Technical Advisory Committee to the Steering Committee of Elected Officials. They will be holding a hearing on our population projections for the city on January 24th at 9 a.m. at Spokane County Water Resource Center at 1004 North Freya Street. Bottom line is this is just a starting point for what we call the land quantity analysis. It's that really looks at trying to figure out if we have enough available lands that are zoned appropriately with appropriate infrastructure to serve the housing needs going into the future, or the population needs, and then we'll get into the housing based upon that. So, next slide, please. So then we start the population allocation by jurisdiction. So we've already been looking at this with the county planning group. The initial population allocation based upon our past growth patterns. And we feel pretty comfortable using that as a starting place. Now each jurisdiction has to go and look at their, the available lands. We need to evaluate available land for residential development as a tool to determine the ability to support anticipated population growth. Considers housing potential based upon allowing zoning densities, and it is an iterative process. So we'll go through, we'll see what the regression analysis says about what our growth potential is. We think it's not unreasonable until we start looking at the land. We'll have to look for ourselves. The remaining residential lands are mostly in entitlement already, which means that the people are not going to give up their entitlement to try and get a greater density. So we're going to have to look at that. We're probably more limited than most. Airway Heights, by the way, is the other small jurisdiction that's in this similar boat because of their growth patterns also. But we're going to have to take a really close look at what we have available, what has already been entitled, and where development can occur. But we also, the starting place is that looking at the available lands, and then we also look at, so what happens if we apply the Growth Management Act housing requirements? What happens if the ADUs? Now, one of the things I have to say about this is this is an exercise in math. And we already allow ADUs in every single zone in the city. I think since I've been here with the city, we might have had 3 or 4 applications come in. It doesn't happen very often. It does happen. It is an allowable use. We may see more of that as housing gets tighter. And so we have to look at that. But ADUs are not even practical in all scenarios. One of the things you look at in with larger lots, one of the things that comes to mind is like Legacy Ridge. We have these super large lots in Legacy Ridge. The problem is they're all topographically challenged. You know, they're limited as to what kind of development could occur there. And then in other areas, we have much denser housing patterns with more open space. And again, what comes to mind is the River District. But those open spaces aren't necessarily developable because they're dedicated to an owners association. So there will be a lot of adjustments. So we will do an iterative process. First, we'll look at the available lands just with our zoning densities. We'll say, what does build out look like? We think build out looks differently than the 2018 build out analysis that we did, in part because we based assumptions on multifamily and mixed use zones based upon a fairly recent multifamily development that occurred prior to 2018. And what we've seen is that, and we didn't expect the amount of multifamily that has now achieved entitlement here in the city. We've also had some changes to zoning for like MTC, which has the potential for additional multifamily. We didn't look at really an expectation of any residential in the River District commercial zone. And I now think that that is very much not just a possibility, but the River District commercial zone is likely going to have a fair bit of residential in it. And so there are some things that we're going to have to revisit, and why I think that when we look at our population projection, I think using the OFM, I think we were looking at 21,000 and change And that as a swag, that seems like it's not unrealistic. But now we have to do the population allocation really serves as a basis to determine the urban growth area, going back to that, because we have to figure out if we have enough residential lands to support the growth of population countywide to determine whether or not our urban growth area needs to expand. And so we will be doing this iterative process, as will be all the other jurisdictions. We're probably going to be, there's giving back some of what the initial allocation is. There's others who are probably expecting more. We'll have to see where the math takes us. Next slide, please. We also have to address housing needs by allocation. Once we have the population allocation, Commerce does provide an allocation by county for all of those different categories that we identified. The moderate, low, very low, and extremely low income, permanent supportive housing, emergency housing, and emergency shelters, duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes. They do have a tool. It's called the Housing All Planning Tool. We're starting to look at it. We have to have the population allocation by jurisdiction before we can begin to really play with that. So we can look at it now. I considered sharing that with you now because we have our first round population allocation, but because I know that's going to change, it will change all of the housing analysis as well. Ultimately, the Planning Technical Advisory Committee will make a recommendation to the Steering Committee of Elected Officials, and the Steering Committee of Elected Officials will make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners as to the allocation of those. Just for the record, whatever the Board of County Commissioners adopts, we have to live with as kind of our base for planning our comprehensive plan. Or for our housing piece, but that's going to significantly affect our land use chapter, and that will affect our transportation and utilities and so on and so forth. So this is a pretty critical piece. This analysis to figure out these different types of housing and the different housing for different economic categories. Commerce is referring to as a land capacity analysis. It's probably more useful to think about it as a housing capacity analysis because that's what it really is. And everybody's we already have a land quantity analysis. It's a little confusing. But it's taking the deeper dive to document the capacity to meet growth allocations for all of those housing needs. Next slide, please. So this, let's call it a housing capacity analysis. We need to identify land capacity for new housing by zone, classify zones by allowed housing types and densities, relate zone categories to potential income levels and special housing types served. And I'm not going to repeat everything from low density, moderate density, low rise, mid rise, ADUs, market rates with subsidies. Summarize capacity by zone category, compare projected housing needs to capacity, implement zoning actions to address lack of capacity for one or more of the housing types. And then, I want to pause here for a second. So remember I talked about the emergency shelters, transitional and supportive housing that we did back in 2021, before there was even any sample legislation out because the legislature just said you had to have it in place. So we did that. What's changed is now we're going to have to do this LCA specifically for emergency shelters unless we eliminate our occupancy and spacing limitations. So we allow for emergency shelters anywhere where we allow a hotel. But we do have a maximum capacity of 75 persons, and we do have a separation distance, and I want to say it's 1,000 feet or something like that. But those two limitations on the emergency shelters would require us to then go through a full-blown LCA analysis just for emergency shelters. And when we look at the projection and again, because this is not a final number, when we look at the projection, if we take our first round allocation that we, for population that hasn't yet been fine-tuned, but if we take that first round statistical number, the 21,000 and change, and plug it into that land capacity tool, what we see from Commerce's tool is that a city of our size should have about over 300 beds. We've got 0. And so that's without growing our population. And so that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to provide those through partnerships, et cetera. And I know, Tom, you have been involved in those conversations and whatnot. But those are things that we're going to really have to seriously grapple with. We were talking today at the Planning Technical Advisory Committee meeting, and we're actually trying to get some subject matter experts to participate with us as it relates to housing and emergency shelters and whatnot. And so we will be reaching out to Dawn Kinder to see who she might recommend for that on our committee. We're doing similar things with the climate resiliency. So that's the heavy lift of housing. Next slide, please. Oh, back up, please. So the next piece is the climate change and resiliency element. That's the new requirement. We've got nothing in our comp plan like this. There's 2 elements to it that we're going to have to address. One is the mitigation sub-element, which would require us to look at policies and tools related to reduction in greenhouse gas and or reduction in vehicle miles traveled. There's also the climate resiliency sub-element. And when you think about climate resiliency, think about it in terms of, we've seen major changes to severe weather events and whatnot. I think we've probably had 500-year storms in the last 2 to 3 years, right? And so looking at what's happening with climate and what the impacts are to things like the 100-year storm that we base our floodplains on, and our stormwater events on, and floodplains, et cetera. Also, another example would be looking at impacts to roof snow loads. And the reason why I say that is, as we experience warming, we're going to see wetter, heavier snow loads. And so is that going to be caused to increase our snow loads? We already have 40-pound snow loads, which is 10 pounds above what is required in the county. So we do have some comfort factor, but we really are going to want to look at that and say, is this something that we should be planning for in the future? Also, another example would be wildfire risk. And so next slide, please. So for the mitigation sub-element, there are 4 potential pathways. So we could look at greenhouse gas and or vehicle mile traveled reduction goals and policies. We could do that through our own lens. We could do that through the lens of using Ecology has created a framework to do this. We could look at vehicle miles a vehicle miles traveled study and evaluation. And looking at greenhouse gas reductions through transportation policies. Or we could develop a greenhouse gas reduction goals and policies based on emissions inventory and analysis. So those are the four basic pathways. Next slide, please. So with the resiliency sub-element, we need to audit plans and policies. An example would be our emergency response plan. So just to take just a brief dive into emergency response, there is a county-wide emergency response plan. Liberty Lake has an annex to that. But as it relates to things like evacuation protocols and whatnot, everybody in the county looks to the sheriff to say, and when we had the Gray wildfire and the other wildfire going at the same time, and then we had a wildfire near my home, the Cheney wildfire, nobody had any information. Nothing was getting updated on the county's emergency website and whatnot. One of the things we heard from our citizens was that a lot of concern, we are on the edge of the wildland urban interface. Do we have additional evacuation plans? One of the things that we could certainly do through this is really assess our vulnerabilities and risks. And then really look at how we might beat that up. We may want to really have a wildfire emergency response plan, or we may want to have some plan for more local control over evacuation in our area, or those are just ideas. Those are just kind of some of the thoughts that came out of what we experienced this summer. So under the legislation, there's several potential pathways. We can select and adopt existing goals and policies. We could develop new policies, or we can adopt mitigation strategies. There are tools available for this through U of W mapping and US climate resiliency. There's an assessment tool. So we do have tools available to us. We also have for a community of our size, the state has dedicated $500,000 for this climate resiliency and mitigation requirement. And next slide, please. So we have applied to Commerce for this grant. We've applied. So the grants are available on a biennium basis. So we applied for the whole scope to complete the requirements of these two House bills, spread over 2 biennium, and we saved $100,000 for implementation. So we've got this biennium, and the contract will be coming out shortly. We requested, I believe, $255,000. We needed some in the second biennium to bring this home, to finish up the process. But $400,000 between now and June 30th, 2026 to get us across the finish line. The scope that we proposed is based on deliverables. The grant is basically based on deliverables. So we do need to establish a public and tribal engagement strategy, and really engaging, making sure that we're also engaging all different aspects and elements of our community, all stakeholders, etc. We're also going to have to be working regionally. We're going to have to be working with subject matter experts with Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency, with SRTC, etc. And so the public engagement strategy is huge. Also greenhouse gas inventory and reduction measures is the second task. The third task is community climate resiliency, and we're gonna identify climate impacts and map vulnerabilities. And we're going to do risk assessments based upon that data. We'll develop climate goals and policies and develop a matrix of goals and policies related to, this is the thing that's interesting about this climate section. It impacts so many other areas. It's going to have impacts on transportation goals and policy, land use, capital facilities, utilities, and parks and recreation elements. And because of that, we're gonna use that, the grant money to leverage. So we're not just gonna do community engagement for the climate piece, although that's gonna be, we're going to tailor it for that. It's also going to look at how that dovetails with the rest of the community engagement. And so on and so forth. The same thing with policies. Many of these policies are going to feed back into these other elements that we have to do. And finally, at the end of the process, we actually have to draft a climate chapter. And so that's the final task. Next slide, please. Other significant things, as I mentioned, we have, I don't know what was done originally. I only know that since the 2015 comp plan, all we've done is look at the 6-year transportation plan, which is the minimum requirement of the state law, and just incorporated by reference. Again, for a city that is, you know, looking at build out in less than 20 years, it certainly would make sense for us to look at our capital facilities plan through build out, do the build out analysis, do a full 20-year plan. What we're going to see changes in housing and population projections and changes in land use that are going to affect transportation. And one of the things we back in 2020 and 2021, we did the network analysis. We're going to need to update that again based upon the changes in our land use. That's going to really feed the transportation element. The other things that we're going to be looking at in our capital facilities plan will be parks and municipal facilities. As I'm sure many of you are aware, we're bursting at the seams here at City Hall. We're looking at building out a new library facility in a new building. We're looking at growing our police department based upon our population projections, and we'll need to provide facilities associated with that. This really requires that we look at this comprehensively and figure out what is the long range and how are we going to pay for it. That's the value of doing a build out capital facilities plan. We're not a sewer and water purveyor. We will coordinate with other utility providers to understand so that they know what we're seeing in terms of our land use and make sure that the capacities are there. But capital facilities will focus on these specific areas. And again, one of the things I do want to say is that we're also eligible this year for a grant for our comprehensive plan. I believe it's in July, we'll be putting that out for $125,000. The thought process is that we would use it for some of these other, we're going to get the climate resiliency is going to get us a long way, but we're also going to need to look at the network analysis. And we probably also want to hire somebody to assist with the housing element, just because it's a huge piece. Next slide, please. So next steps. We're expecting to get the paperwork on our climate resiliency in the next month or two and get that before council. We will brief you on the full scope of that, and we'll be bringing forward a task order with parametrics to assist us with that. What's kind of cool is that we worked with, they recently acquired a firm that is doing the climate resiliency stuff on the west side right now. So they're one of the few people that in the state, working in the state, who are already dealing with these new regulations. And which, as Commerce has said so many times, they're actually flying the plane as they're building it. And as I said, the staff will also be working on a comprehensive plan periodic update grant so that we can fund some of the heavier lifts within this or the specialty stuff. Work program. I am working on a work program right now. And this is just a taste. I wanted to give you the overview. I anticipate that if not next month, the following month, I will be coming back to you with a draft work program that kind of lays out the whole process for this comp plan update. This is a heavy lift. It is a heavy lift. But we've got the best commissioners at the table, so there you go. We also, back please. We also are going to be working in-house on the land quantity analysis. We will be bringing our analyses for the city back to you so that you can review and have input and whatnot. And also working on this housing capacity analysis almost hand in hand with that. And those are foundational to really the rest of the plan. So those are the big pieces. The public engagement plan, I want to pause on for a minute. We do have it in our scope to develop the public engagement plan, but one of the things that we really want to do is we really want to get beyond the old, oh, we have an open house or a virtual open house or whatever. I mean, that's all well and good. We've got to figure out how we get to different elements and aspects within our community. And we're probably going to want to do some joint meetings with the Community Engagement Commission so that because they could be a real resource to this planning commission in terms of really getting more community input on this. So just some of my thoughts on it. Next slide, please. Oh, thank goodness we're done. I hope I didn't overwhelm you, but I wanted you to have, I know it's a lot. It is a huge data dump. We have a lot. It's going to be a yeoman's effort to get this across the finish line. But I really do, the biggest challenge is just trying to coordinate our data with those who control what our control totals will be. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Lisa. I think the thing here to recognize is this is really important work that we are all doing. I mean, this is the foundation for the whole city, this comprehensive plan. And what we're doing here is continuing to build the foundation for this city and its growth and its development and becoming a better quality of life here for everybody. I think that's really an important aspect of this. And it is going to be a heavy lift, but it's something, we're all getting paid well to do. So I appreciate that greatly. We are now going to citizen comments. Is there anyone online or anyone present that would like to speak? Philip? No?
There is nobody
Nobody
online.
online?
Oh,
Okay,
I'm
all
sorry.
right, so
You're not nobody, Megan.
no citizen comments, so we will go to report, secretary's report.
So I just have one quick comment to make. And that is that the mayor has interviewed Phil Foyer for the vacant planning commissioner position, and he will be going forward for confirmation at Tuesday's council meeting. I really have to get it into Granicus, but we just got your paperwork back today, and so that will be on Tuesday's agenda for confirmation. And then we will have a full slate of commissioners, which is really good because we got a lot of work ahead of us.
Good. Any upcoming agenda items?
As I said, probably the biggest piece is we'll be sharing with you at the next meeting, likely we'll be sharing the scope and calendar schedule for the climate resiliency piece. Hopefully I will have at least a rough draft of the work program and the timeline for this comp plan update. And that those are kind of my next big to-dos. And, once we get the grant, we will be looking at the community engagement plan.
Great, thank you. Next is planning commissioner reports. Any commissioners have reports they'd like to share? Anyone? Commissioner
Yeah,
Saul.
thank you. Are you and Amy still involved in the TTC for SRTC?
So I am, but it's hit or miss whether I can actually make the meetings.
Okay, well, I'm on the TAC again.
Oh,
They booted me
wonderful.
off when I was on the council because you can't do it as a public official. And I'm also on the steering committee. So we'll connect, and I don't know if Amy's going to be going to those on potential revenue sources and also the goals. We have between now and May to set the goals for the SRTC's next couple of years. And it has to do with that target zero. There's
Right.
money attached. I could care less about what you call it, but there's money attached for us that we might be able to get our hands on for a master transportation plan. Let me see, have I ever said that before? For
Ooh.
10 years. So that would fit in with our comprehensive plan.
It would actually fill out our network analysis, and then we might be able to use our funds for something else. Nice.
Great. Any other input?
I'd like to ask if anyone would like to present to city council at this council meeting. This was pretty, I know this was a pretty dry topic.
Anyone like to do it? Or if not, I will do it. Back you up. You can count on me.
Thank you,
And
sir.
that's next Tuesday.
It is Tuesday at 7 PM.
Okay. Without further ado, can I hear a motion for adjournment? Is there a second? Any discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
How are you? Nice to see you. Nice to be sitting here. Again.